Hi, my name is Jason Clark, the South Dakota State University Extension Soil Fertility Specialist. Welcome back to our Soil Health and Nutrient Management section of the Master Gardeners class. As we look at our outline for this class, we can see what we've done so far and kind of where we're going in the future. To this point, we've hit on all of the top topics here, from soil composition down to essential plant nutrients. And for the remaining of our course, we're going to be focusing on how we can improve soil properties. And there are several different areas. And really our goal of improving soil properties really has to do with our goal of maximizing the growth potential of our plants, whether it's our vegetables, our fruits, our flowers, or our trees. And there are several different areas that we would like to improve of our soil so we can improve the growth of our plants. Out of these 6 different areas that we'd like to improve, in this video we are going to be focusing on nutrient retention. And nutrient retention is really tied to soil texture and what's in the soil. So if we look here, we're going to get 2 contrasting soils. We have a coarse textured soil that has large particles in it and large soil pores, and we have a fine textured soil that has many small particles and many small pores. And that's going to lead to several different characteristics of these soils. So first of all, if we look at our coarse textured soils, we see that we have large pore spaces in here compared to these smaller pore spaces over here in the fine textured soils. These large pore spaces do not hold water well. Water tends to come down into the soil and go through it rather quickly. Whereas in a fine textured soil, it takes a little bit longer to travel through these fine pores here. And because water takes longer to travel through those pores, usually fine textured soils hold water better. And in addition, our coarse textured soils, because they don't hold water well, they don't have as many negatively charged surfaces, they don't hold nutrients as well either. If we compare this to our fine textured soils, as we said, small pore spaces hold water well. They have more surface area, more negative charges. It's able to hold on to those positive nutrients rather well. And so really what we see here is there's association between drainage and nutrient loss potential. When we have quick drainage through that soil, large pore spaces, we're not holding on to nutrients as well as if we had smaller pore spaces. So one of the best ways that we can improve our ability to hold water and to hold nutrients is to add organic matter. So this organic matter is light, it's fluffy, it's fibrous. It can hold water and nutrients very well. It has lots of negative charged sites on it that hold on to those positively charged nutrients. It also improves soil structure and drainage because it creates a little bit larger pore space at times. Helps with soil structure because it acts as a glue, taking soil particles, sand, silts, and clays and bringing them together to form those granular aggregates that we want. And it also provides a home and a food source for microbes, worms, and insects that help with that drainage aspect, with moving water down and through those channels those worms and insects and other organisms make in the soil. So there are several different commercial organic sources of organic matter. We can go to the store and we can buy a ready-to-use topsoil that has soil mixed with organic matter sources already in it together. We can go to the store and buy just a commercial compost mix somewhere that's already taken raw materials, broken them down, and are ready as compost we can add to the surface of our garden. The next thing we can do is we can add peat. Peat is a very fibrous organic material that's light and fluffy, absorb water, hold on to nutrients very well. And the last thing is most of our local landfills have yard compost. They take leaves that we send there and tree parts and limbs. They break them down, chip them up, and they have their own compost that they sell that we can go and pick up. But we also have some local sources where we can just get locally. There's manure from herbivores such as cows, chickens. We can use the garbage from our kitchens, from our garbage cans. We can use the yard waste, plant material, leaf clippings, things like that. However, with these raw materials, there's a few cautions that we should keep in mind with our gardens since we're wanting to harvest and eat these things. One is that viable weed seeds and pathogens can exist in raw manure products as they haven't been through the process that usually kills these. The next thing is that herbicides can be still active in lawn clippings. We need to be careful of how soon since we've sprayed and when we take those clippings and add them to our gardens or our compost piles. The next thing is usually raw materials are a lot more bulky and harder to incorporate than already a broken down material. So composting 101, we want to take these raw materials we see here and we want them to be broken down into something that, such as we can see here in the lower part of this picture. So what are the steps? One is we add fresh organic materials to the container. Two, we need to turn that compost frequently so we can provide the oxygen that microbes need in order to break down raw materials. Three, microbes like water. They need it, but they don't like to be wet. They don't like to be soggy. They don't want to be swimming in water while they're trying to do their job. Four is we need to keep the amount of carbon to nitrogen ratio around 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And in a few minutes, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. Last thing we do is we wait. We let the microbes do their job, breaking down that raw material into organic materials that we can apply to our garden. And one key component here is we want to maintain a controlled environment. If we maintain good temperature, good moisture, we're going to maximize the decomposition work that those microbes can do. So if we're thinking about doing our own compost piles, we may want to think, what kind of container should we use? Well, there's a few options. We can get different containers. As you can see here, we can build them ourselves out of wood, purchase ones that are plastic or mesh fence ones. And really what we want for a good container is we want them to be durable. Something can take some beating and they'll still stick around, but we want something where air can get in, where water and other things can drain down below. And we want it to be easily accessible because we've got to manage this compost for pretty intensively at different times. So we need to be able to easily access it. And we want something that's protected and secure. So you can purchase something, or you can also, of course, build it yourself. And here are some different examples. We can take some different structures, use wood and fencing to make them, use wire mesh so we get that air movement in and also help control it. Our family, growing up on a farm, we use pallets for a lot of things, so they're always laying around. And you can use them, of course, for creating a compost pile, or you can just use a wire fence to kind of create a segged off area where you can do the things you need to do as far as mixing and incorporating raw materials. And the last thing, you can just take those raw materials, dig a trench and put them there. It takes a little bit more time, a little more costly, but you can also use it there. Some key things to remember when choosing a material is to use chicken wire or woven wire fencing that's strong but also can withstand some time. Rot resistant lumber, because this will be lots of microbes decomposing. It's moist environment. So the other portion that's really important to remember, as we described a little earlier, is to knowing that C to N ratio, the amount of carbon to the amount of nitrogen that's in the materials that we want to decompose. Because we want to keep that around 30 to 1. And so we need to add some low C to N ratio materials with some high C to N ratio materials. So some examples of low C to N ratio materials are things like coffee grounds, cow manure, grass clippings, fruit waste, and vegetable trimmings. And you can see here what those C to N ratios are, and they're all, for the most part, below that 30 to 1 level. So we can take that, we can combine it with some of these other materials that we want to break down that are in our yards, such as leaves or horse manure, peat moss, newspaper, pine needles, wood, straw, things like that. Take those high C to N ratio materials, mix them with our low C to N ratio materials to get that 30 to 1 combination that we want for good decomposition. So here are some good ideas to think. We're trying to get that average amount of 30 to 1. So here we also need to remember just a few things with composting, is that compost needs moisture. And that's really because microorganisms need water. They're the ones that are doing the work. We can't see them because they're so small, but they're in there doing their job of decomposing all this organic material. They like to be watered often, but they don't want to be soaking completely. So a rule of thumb is feel like a damp sponge, and that equals about a 40 to 50% water content, which is ideal. So a lot of times when we're adding water, it's also a good time to mix up the organic materials to help with decomposition. And that mixing is really key because the mixing is what incorporates oxygen, and microbes need oxygen. So we can do this on a small scale with a fork, little medium scale with some equipment, or even commercial larger scale where we're using a big beater going across this huge composting pile. But really the idea of mixing is microbes need oxygen in order to decompose organic materials. So it's really important to do that. When we're adding new materials, we don't want to do it too tightly. If we do it too tightly, there's less oxygen that the microbes can access to do their job. And also a good idea is to frequently mix or disturb the compost, especially when we're putting in new materials. So manually mix that material often to help get that incorporated, to get microorganisms doing their thing. The next thing is temperature. Just like us, when we get sick and our bodies need to be more efficient with fighting an illness, as they'll increase in temperature, that's where our fever comes in. Microbes do the same thing. They work more efficiently at higher temperatures, so we want to increase that temperature of that compost pile. And we do that by doing all the steps we talked about before, adding moisture to the right levels, mixing frequently. We really want that temperature to be above 50 degrees Fahrenheit for rapid decomposition. And when we can get that up above 130 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 days, we're going to kill weed seeds. We get it there for 3 to 15 days, we're going to kill pathogens. And that's really one of our goals, is we want to be able to do that. And then as opposed to when it's hot summer days, and then those cooler falls, early springs, winter, decomposing kind of slows down because the temperature is less. So the compost activity and the quickness of that is going to also slow down. There's also several different things we could potentially add to our compost to speed it up or help a little bit. There's different enzymes or microbes or different things like that that you can see here. We can also add soil, because soil has lots of microbes in it. We can add those native microbes, help increase the population to do what they need to do. We can also add nitrogen fertilizer. Adding nitrogen fertilizer helps reduce that C to N ratio, because you're increasing that nitrogen. So if you have lots of high carbon things you put in there, you think, oh, maybe I did too many, you can add some nitrogen fertilizer to help reduce that. Just mix it in well there, and it'll help the microbes have enough nitrogen in order to break down the carbon. And as we saw here, you can add these commercial products. How economical they are is kind of up to you. So the next thing we want to know is, how long is this going to take? How long does it take us to get from these raw materials into this fluffy, fibrous material we can add to our gardens and our flower beds? So mature compost, we're talking 4 to 9 months, depending on the average temperature being above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to reduce the volume of that raw material by about half, and it's going to have a really earthy smell to it. If it gets that pungent, kind of gross, nasty smell, it's likely we need to increase the aeration, we need to lessen the water that's in there, kind of mix things up a little bit better. So after we have our compost, we then need to incorporate it into our yards, our gardens, our flower beds, and whatnot there. So we're going to distribute that 1 to 2 inch layer on the soil surface, however we can get it out there. And then we're going to incorporate it. We're going to incorporate it with a spade, a fork, a rototiller, a shovel, anything like that we're going to use. So that's kind of the dry compost thing we think of most often. Another one that's not used as prevalent, and I by no means am an expert in this, so you'll probably have to do your own sleuthing on the internet to figure out more about how to do this, but there's also compost tea. And the definition of compost tea is liquid fermentation of various raw and composted products with carbon sourced in liquid form. So they take a carbon source, whether it's organic matter, depending on how much it's broken down, they mix it with water. Sometimes they aerate it to get the oxygen in there to help with the decomposition process. And once it's kind of fermented long enough, they'll take it and then they'll apply it to either the soil or to the leaves. It's a really great source of several different things. Some of them are humic acids, has microbes, has nutrients. These nutrients are in liquid form, so they're easily available for the plants to take up, which is great. Plants love less work, so they're all for easily available nutrients. So we've just focused on how we can improve the nutrient retention of our soils by helping to add organic sources that have lots of negative charged sites, are able to hold water and lessen the amount of water that's running through the soil, and also with that, lessen the amount of nutrients that are moving down that soil profile as well. So here are just a few ideas of things that will hopefully help you improve your soils and their nutrient retention abilities. So in the successive videos, we'll continue to hit each of these below topics. I just want to thank you for your time, and as always, you can reach me to ask any other questions for clarification. Thank you.